The mountain had not been on anyone's radar. It was a 4-mile moderate trail in a state park where they had hiked 12 times, and the forecast was clear, and the family had a rule that said they turned around at the 2-mile mark when they had Olive with them, because Olive was 3 and 3-year-olds had a limited opinion on second miles. The dog that changed the day was not theirs. He was a large brown dog, the kind of indeterminate mixed breed that gets called a lab mix because that is the closest category. And he was alone on the trail, no collar, no owner in sight, running from the direction they were heading toward the trailhead behind them with an urgency that other hikers on the trail had noticed and were watching. He was not running away from something. He was running toward the trailhead. There was a difference in the movement. He stopped in front of Nina and Olive and her husband Jorge. He stopped and stood there with his sides heaving, and he looked at them, and then he turned and looked back up the trail toward where he had come from, and then he looked at them again. Jorge said, "Something is wrong up there." He said it without knowing how he knew, or whether he was right, or whether he was projecting narrative onto the behavior of a stray dog that had simply been startled by something and was going home. Nina said, "Let's go down." They went down. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you are in the right place. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one. 40 minutes later, standing at the trailhead, they watched 4 other hikers descend the trail rapidly and a park ranger come up in a utility vehicle. There had been a tree fall on the upper section of the trail, a large oak that had been compromised by the previous week's ice storm, and that had come down across the trail at approximately the 2.5-mile mark. No one was injured. The trail was closed. Jorge and Nina had been heading to the 2-mile mark. The direction they had been heading, at their pace with Olive, would have put them at the 2.5-mile section approximately 30 minutes after the tree fell. The park ranger, when Jorge described the dog, said, "I've seen him before. He's a regular out here, no owner that anyone's ever identified. He just runs the trail." He said dogs often sense structural instability in trees before the fall occurs. They hear subsonic vibrations from the cracking wood that are below human auditory threshold. He said there are documented cases of trail dogs alerting to tree fall events before they happen. He said, "Sounds like he was warning the trail." Has your dog, or any animal, ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Nina thought about the dog stopping in front of them specifically. She thought about the specific quality of his looking. At them, up the trail, back at them. She had told Olive it was a friendly dog that needed to go home, which was the explanation that fit a 3-year-old's frame of reference. She had not told Olive what she had thought in the moment, that this dog was telling them something. She could not prove that. She was a scientist, a materials engineer, and she had a professional relationship with the concept of proof. She knew what the alternative explanations were. The dog had been startled by the falling tree and was running, and they had happened to be in his path, and the looking back had been the behavior of a disoriented dog rather than a communicating one. She also knew that Jorge had said something is wrong up there before anyone had any information. She knew that he had said it in response to what the dog was doing, not to anything environmental. She thought, Jorge is not someone who projects narrative onto situations. He is a civil engineer. He builds bridges. She thought he saw the same thing I saw. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Olive remembered the dog. She talked about him for several weeks afterward, the way 3-year-olds carry the specific animals they have encountered in a preferential mental file. She called him the running dog. She asked twice if he was okay. Nina said, "I think he was fine. I think he goes on the trail a lot." Olive said, "Does he have a person?" Nina said, "I think he has lots of people. I think he takes care of the whole trail." Olive considered this. She said, "That's a big job. Nina said, "I think he's good at it." She thought about the ranger's face when he said dogs sense structural instability in trees before the fall. The matter-of-fact delivery of someone who had seen this before and had placed it in the category of things that happened on trails alongside weather changes and wildlife movement and all the other information that human hikers were the last to receive. She had been hiking for 30 years. She had been receiving trail information through 2 olfactory receptors and a hearing range that stopped at 20 kilohertz. The brown dog on the trail had been receiving the same information through a system with 300 million receptors and a hearing range that doubled her ceiling. She thought she had been the least equipped person on that trail, informationally speaking. She thought she had gone down anyway. She had done the right thing with the information she had. Sometimes the information came from an unexpected direction. The correct response was still to go down.